Good morning. Before we start, I wanted to say last week, good morning. I think some people were asking questions in the Q&A, and some people were putting them in the chat. I think if you guys have any questions, which please bring your questions. I love questions, or comments, put them in the chat. It's easier for me to find them there. And then I'm going to share my screen with you guys today. Can everybody see that? Chat over here. Perfect. All right, what time is it? 10:02. Okay, let's start. This week I had an interesting week. I had a patient call me who had narcolepsy, diagnosed at an early age, and he wanted to get food sensitivity testing done. And I said, of course, I think everyone should get testing done. I think it's important, but I didn't think there was going to be a connection. And then I told him, but I do some more research. And sure enough, there is a connection between narcolepsy and food sensitivity testing. So he came in, and it reminded me that a lot of people get quite confused between food sensitivity testing versus food allergy testing. And so today I thought, let's spend the time let me help kind of simplify it and tell you who should be tested, and kind of do a little, show you what a sample test report looks like. So first of all, what is a true food allergen? These are immediate reactions of the immune system that occur within minutes of eating the food. It's kind of akin to an autoimmune reaction. The body initiates an immediate attack via production of Ig antibodies. These Ig antibodies are located on mast cells. Once these are activated, they release histamine. The histamine then causes a cascade of reactions, and these can be mild to moderate to more severe. Some of those reactions would be itchiness. That itchiness can cause like itchy mouth, itchy ears, rashes, hives. We might see nasal congestion, runny nose, sneezing, that type of stuff. In a more severe case, we start to see constriction of the respiratory airways. Maybe that just starts off as a cough, but can get more severe where we have trouble swallowing, breathing, shortness of breath, anaphylaxis, etc. These are the people that really need an EpiPen. We'll see dilation of the blood vessels, which can lead to chest pain, a drop in blood pressure. And then we also see increase in gastric acid secretion, which can cause diarrhea, stomach pain, nausea, vomiting, etc. Now, most people, right, most of your true food allergens happen at a young age. And so people are pretty aware if they have true food allergens. As food sensitivities go, these are non-IgE related. In this scenario, a food protein antigens bind to antibodies and form these immune complexes, which can either be systemic or localized. So as far as your antibody response goes, you either have IgG antibodies or you have IgE antibodies or IgA. These IgE are those, what we just talked about, those immediate food allergens, that immediate response. But we also produce IgA antibodies. These antibodies are only localized in mucosal tissue. So, your saliva, tears, intestinal tract, your bronchial tract, but most of them is located in your gastrointestinal tract. So we can see that you can form these immune complexes that stay localized in the GI tract, which can cause, all of your heartburn, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, nausea, that type of stuff. Or they can go systemic, which we see with the IgG antibodies. These IgG antibodies are located in almost all your body cells. And so those immune complexes, just think of it as an inflammatory reaction, can go just about anywhere in the body and can cause symptoms. And these can be vast. They can be, we can see migraines, headaches, brain fog, ADHD, irritability, nervousness. We might see weight gain. Fatigue is really common. We might see stuff like rashes, itchiness, the rosacea. Maybe we see asthma-like symptoms, dark circles under the eyes, chronic congestion, joint pain, muscle stiffness. I'm trying to think, list goes on and on and on. And if these go undetected, right, you're eating a food and it's a delayed reaction. So you might have up to 72 hours before you have symptoms. You might not contribute that banana that you ate a day and a half ago to why you have joint pain or fatigue. And so you continue to eat these foods. It's going undetected, and this can lead to autoimmune diseases, a breakdown in the GI barrier where we see IBS, irritable bowel disease, what naturopaths like to call leaky gut, SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, etc. It becomes a chronic source of inflammation, which can lead to a whole host of symptoms, right? We know that inflammation is a contributing factor to diabetes, cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis, Alzheimer's, like the list goes on. And so it's important for whether you have symptoms that you're concerned about, or you're worried about your overall wellness and health and, prevention of disease, testing your antibodies to foods is an important part of that. The last thing I want to mention is that people get quite confused what a food intolerance versus sensitivity is. A food intolerance has nothing to do with your immune system. This is usually some sort of either an exterior factor like caffeine or medications or whatnot that are not allowing you to appropriately break down your food. Another huge one is the lack of enzymes, a classic one that most people know, people that are lactose intolerant. They don't have the enzyme lactase to break down the milk sugar lactose. So unrelated to your immune system and important to test, but the way that you go about testing is very different. Now, regarding testing, all companies are different. It's definitely becoming a hot trend. I see like ads on Instagram for people getting tested. You guys are seeing each time I change the page, right? I hope so. What we're seeing is with many companies, what happens is you are eating a food, right? And you have this whole protein complex, right? It's this thick thing, and it's going to have your carbohydrates and fats mixed in with it, and it reaches the stomach. Your stomach releases hydrochloric acid, which then turns on your digestive enzymes, and you start breaking down that food, that protein. And many companies, what they're doing is they're testing this whole protein. So it's not the pure part of the protein. So you're going to get a lot of potentially false positives, potentially false negatives. It can only be tested for water-soluble proteins. And unfortunately, some of what we react to, like gluten, is non-water soluble. So I find that these tests are inaccurate and a waste of money. And I do find that when you hear about people debunking the importance of testing is because of companies like this, where they're testing the whole protein or the extracts. They also sometimes test the uncooked or the raw version of the food. So for instance, egg, many companies are testing raw egg, but how many of us are actually eating raw egg? Vibrant America is one company that I use a lot. What they do is once those proteins leave, so they've been broken down, and your proteins, right, are made of chains of amino acids that are held together by peptide bonds. These peptide bonds then enter the small intestine, where they're getting broken down to smaller and smaller peptides, which then lead to your amino acids, which then go and do what they need to do, build muscle, make hormones, that type of stuff. And so what Vibrant America does is, and some other companies, is they test these small peptides. So we're getting the actual antigen. We're actually testing your immune reaction to those antigens. So it's much more specific, a much higher sensitivity. It doesn't matter if it's digested or it's raw or cooked at that point. Doesn't matter if it's water soluble or non-water soluble at that point. So the quality and what is being tested is very important. So what does a standard test look like? Well, this is what a test looks like. You have the option of testing, I think the minimum is 96 up to about 209. The 96 panel gives you a lot of all the basics, the major food reactions that people have, such as like gluten, dairy, eggs, that type of stuff, citrus, your nightshades, that type of thing. And what they're going to test is you can add on an IgE if you want, but if you were just looking at the food sensitivities, you would be testing the IgG and the IgA, which I also think is very important. A lot of companies are just testing the IgE. Well, some people can have reactions that go systemic, but they don't have or many people have reactions that go systemic, but some people have reactions like this person, let's say, anchovy, their reaction does not go systemic, but it does stay localized in the mucosal membrane, so the GI tract, and causes a lot of inflammation. So I do like this company because they test both. I get a really accurate read on how you're reacting to your foods. If it's staying localized, then I know this person is going to be really at risk for leaky gut, SIBO, IBS, that type of stuff. If it's going systemic, well, maybe that would explain their headaches, their rashes, their eczema, their psoriasis, something like that. And then they qualify them to moderate or high risk or low, which is no reaction. And so then we can tailor how to eat your food, right? If you have a high, let's see, this person I'm looking for, a high IgG and IgA, like let's say mung beans, okay, so they have a high IgA and an IgG. This would be someone that would say, you know, you're pretty inflamed when you eat mung beans. Not sure many of us are eating a lot of mung beans, but that would be something that I would want you to avoid for an extended period of time. Maybe if they have moderate reactions, we can start rotating them in and out of their diet. So it really is helpful to start a nutrition plan for patients, to identify any triggers that could be causing inflammation, to explain some of their ailments. And this sample report doesn't have it, but what you would see if you were positive on any of them, they'll give you like a quick breakdown on what you were positive, what you were moderately reactive to, what you were negative to. And then they give you these little bar charts. And then if you were high on anything, like this person has high on beef, they would then talk about, beef is probably a bad example because there's not a lot of hidden sources of beef, but like egg white, egg yolk is an important one. They would then talk about hidden sources, typical food that you see it in, right? A lot of people forget like eggs are used as a glaze in, you know, meringues. Meringues, yeah. Used as a binder, like in meatballs and meatloaf, that type of stuff. They're in like gummy candies. And they also tell you what some of the different names are. So if you were reading your labels, it's not always going to say egg. It might say albumin. It might say lecithin. So those would be cues that eggs are in it. So I do like this. They make it very patient friendly. And I don't think really anyone doesn't benefit from looking at what they're typically eating in their diet that could be causing inflammation, either localized or systemic. And I think that's it. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, that was another example of what they test for. I am going to stop sharing so I can see questions better. Which test is best recommended to determine if a child has food allergy or food sensitivity? Great question. The advancement in testing has been really wonderful in the sense that now we can just do a finger prick, so that we don't have to, before we used to, 10 years ago, I used to have to take like 3 vials of blood. Now I can just do a finger prick and I can test both IgG and IgG antibodies. And IgE antibodies for a child would be the most important, because that's when your Ig antibodies form, when you're a child. IgG antibodies, IgA, can happen anytime in your life, but we definitely see it more as an adult. You're right, the more people keep getting exposed to them, they start forming these reactions. So I would say for a child, I would first start with a food allergy panel, the IgE. Sorry, don't confuse you guys, IgE. But, if cost isn't like a huge issue for you and you really want to know, then I would actually do both. I think it's important. Does that answer it? Hope so. Thumbs up, maybe. Do you have to eat all the foods before testing to be accurate? No, that is a very good question. I have had some people that I have tested and they have said, I have never in my entire life eaten that. So because if they were testing at the higher level, like some other companies, right, when you just eat those complexes, then I would say yes. And that also starts to wonder, like, are you high just because you've been eating a lot of it? With Vibrant America, we're getting the pure antigen and they're mixing it with your blood. So we're seeing what that we're seeing that what antibody complexes are forming. So no, you don't have to have just recently eaten it. And it doesn't matter if you had a bender and you were eating bacon, all weekend long. Yeah, I do think it's good. I think it's funny how many times I have patients that are like, oh, I knew I didn't like that food. There was a reason, or, it never has sit right with me and I never kind of understood why. Can food allergies or food intolerances affect child's growth if they are overlooked and prolonged? I would say yes, right? Food allergies, in the food allergy sense, I would say you're looking for those immediate sensitivity reactions, so probably not about a child's growth. But if we're talking about food intolerances, absolutely. The IgG response goes systemic, and it activates the complement system, which is part of your immune system. It's very complex. I'm not going to get into it. But just think of that as your inflammatory response. Anything that causes inflammation means that it's going to slow down your processes as far as like making hormones. It can affect your sleep. It can, your growth hormones, that type of stuff. I mean, I just think that the inflammation that it can cause can be profound. And like I said, with what started me on this, I would have never thought narcolepsy and food sensitivities could be connected. And then sure enough, I found all this evidence that there is a connection. So I don't think that we can fully understand how much damage it can cause when that inflammation can go anywhere in the body. How much does the test cost? Thank you for asking that. Vibrant America, they are for September doing a discount. It's not huge. I think if anyone has any specific questions, they should contact me, because each panel as you add on is different. So for instance, the 96 food panel is, they give you, I think, a $25 break on it. It's normally $224. It's just under $200. I think it's like $199. But then if you add on and do the next 96, it keeps the benefit, the discount keeps getting bigger. It can get up. I mean, if you wanted to test all 209 foods plus your IgE, I think it comes to like $400 or $500 or something like that. So it gets pretty expensive. Some things can be IgE, some insurances will cover that because that is a risk for death, right, in anaphylaxis. Generally, or, not generally, I don't think any company covers the IgG, IgA reactions. So I have a patient who did test with me back in 2013. Do I need another test? Unfortunately, I would say, if you had it done a couple years ago, I would say probably doesn't matter, but we change a lot year to year, right? The more we're exposed to those foods, especially if we have diets that are really, we kind of eat the same breakfast every morning, same lunch, that type of stuff, we can definitely start to form them just because we've been inundated with them all the time. So yeah, I wouldn't think it would hurt when we're talking 7 years ago to retest for sure. Can food allergies or food intolerances affect BMI, metabolism, or continue to weight gain in otherwise healthy adults? Absolutely. Food intolerances, like weight gain is, I mean, obesity or even, mild weight gain is inflammatory and continues the inflammatory cycle. And so, yes, your BMI is absolutely, your body mass index is absolutely affected. Your metabolism slows down. I think it's a big contributor to weight gain. If you think of inflammation as just, I don't know how else to say it. It's like the flu, like everything kind of goes in, you get inflamed, you hurt, everything slows down, you're not digesting well, nothing's just working well. Everything just kind of gets sluggish. And so, yes, it does affect your metabolism very much so. Is it an urban myth that we can grow out of food intolerances if we eat them in small quantities over a long time? I think that's a really good question too. You're full of good questions today. I do think when we're talking about food allergies, right, with the IG, we do know that if you get shots done, you can develop an immunity to them over time. I question that with IgG because of the immune system that's activated. We're not releasing histamine. We're activating another branch of the immune system called the complement system, which leads to inflammation. And so I do not believe if you have small amounts all the time that you build up a resistance to them. But I do believe that if you go a period of time without them, so like let's say a month, 6 months, that type of stuff, and then reintroduce them, your severity of your reaction might be minimized. I have a lot of patients who come in, like let's say with egg or something, and we have to, they avoid it because egg likes to really remain in like dark crevices, so we see a lot of joint pain and that type of stuff. And so if they avoid it for like 6 months, completely clear out of the system, they tend to be able to add it back in small quantities, versus some of those times maybe they tried it like 3 months into avoiding it and they had this huge reaction. That's also the problem. It's the benefit and the problem too about avoiding it, is that once you add it back in, you now know, if you're, pretty reactive still, what your symptoms are. You're like, oh, I eat eggs and, I get a headache, or I eat eggs and I get an itchy rash or something like that. And so now you can identify it, but you're also now going to be more sensitive because you don't kind of have that floating around antibodies, like already, ready to fire. So I don't know. It's kind of one of those things that I think avoiding it and then either retesting or doing a reintroduction diet. So meaning you add the food in, day one, you add it and you eat lots of it, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then you avoid it for 3 days, and then you do it again. Like monitoring what your symptoms are can be really educational, because now I mean, I can give you one of these tests and I can say you're reactive to, mustard seeds, but you might, have no indication. And so it's then nice to avoid it, add it back in, and see what your actual reaction is. But I don't know if you really grow out of food intolerances. I think if you give long enough break from it, your reactions aren't as severe. Does that make sense? And I'm basing that mostly on patients, who test and then, they came up high on numerous things, gave them up, added them back in, tested, and some of them remain and some of them, became low reactions or moderate reactions. Any other questions? Is there an ideal clean food list which one can use to determine elimination diet by adding potential allergens? Yes. I call most naturopaths, most people call it the anti-inflammatory diet. I can, if you want to send me an email reminder, I can send that to you. But basically, you're avoiding all meat, all dairy, all gluten, all soy, all, what did I say? Meat, dairy, soy, gluten, eggs, citrus, nightshades. I think that's it. I think it's alcohol, coffee, and then you can add them back in. And you would want to choose one food each time and of that food group. So if you were going to, like, let's say dairy was your concern and you were going to reintroduce it, you wouldn't do milk in the morning and cheese for lunch and, you know, cream or something for dinner. You would want to like actually break each one of those down. You know, let's say for me, there's no good cheese alternatives. There's good dairy alternatives. So I would choose, if I was concerned about dairy, I would choose cheese first. I would choose like cheddar cheese. I would eat it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then I would monitor my symptoms. And then I would give a break in between. And then the next week I would try yogurt. And then, you know, a week later I would try, you know, cow's milk, ice cream. Maybe I try ice cream. Are legumes considered a big offender? Thank you. Peanuts. We're not supposed to have peanuts. And as far as the legumes, there's arguments about so back to your other question about the anti-inflammatory diet. Also avoid peanuts. There are some differing opinions on legumes. Some people believe with legumes, you produce these lecithins and that you'd be reactive to that. So there are some versions of the anti-inflammatory diet where you would be avoiding legumes as well. I don't typically do that. I think that doing the anti-inflammatory diet is great, gives your body a rest, but it's difficult. And it is for 21 days. Sorry, I don't think I said that. Any other questions? Thank you all for attending today. I'm sorry I got it out so last minute. I swear I'm going to do better next week. Don't know what I'm going to talk about yet, but if you have any suggestions, please email me or text me, drlsnelson@gmail.com. Copy of this will be on my website. Maybe I'll put up an anti-inflammatory diet on there too, so you guys can see that. My website is drlindsaysnelson.com. And if anyone is interested in testing, please send me an email or a text. I can give you a price breakdown and tell you what the different, you know, profile 1 actually is right here. Oh, I stopped sharing. Actually, I'm going to share my screen again. So profile 1 is all these. Profile 2 is all those. And then you can add foods that, like the third one. You know, by the time you get to these third ones, I kind of think they're sometimes pointless. But for some people, it's important. Your first one is definitely going to give you all the big worrisome ones. And then you can also add the IgE panel on. Oh, I'm not sharing it, am I? I was just pointing to it and you guys can see it. This is a profile 1. This is profile 2, and then profile 3, where you can see, back to your question about legumes, like you can see that, you know, some legumes are pretty low on the allergen index, so not as important to test. But for the first panel, they do kidney bean, navy bean, soybean, and peanuts, which I do think are very important to test. Yeah, and then they have an IgE as well that you can add on. They also have a whole bunch of others, like they call Zoomer panels, where they look more in depthly, like breaking down every part of gluten, every part of dairy, that type of stuff. It can add up. I think that, you know, starting with profile 1 is generally a good place to start. Anything else, guys? Nope. All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Hope to see you next week. Oh, that's what I wanted to say. If you are interested as well, I am doing I'm doing mostly virtual, but I do have patients coming to my home office. If they want to do testing, they can either come to my home office and get the finger prick, or it can be drop shipped to you, but make sure that you are comfortable with pricking your own finger. So anyways, you have two options, which is nice. Before, I always had to be done in the doctor's office. All right. Thank you, guys. Bye.